Hi folks, this is a series of short videos in response to questions that I solicited for short videos from my Patreon supporters. Richard C. asks, how old are the myths? Uh, Meaning we have poems, Skaldic and Eddic, dating to perhaps the 800s. We have mentions of the gods and something like the now famous, recently discovered He is Odin's Man Bracteate, where we see the name of Odin, Wothans, in Proto-Norse in the 400s. Do we think that myths about the gods are, originally from 800s, 400s, somewhere between? Are they earlier than the 400s? Uh, I love dumb analogies, and one that I thought of with this is how old is the Lincoln Memorial? There's a point where the memorial that we recognize has been built, but before that, are we dating when the marble was dug up here in Marble, Colorado, when it was fashioned into something like the blocks that were used there? Do we date it to the time when the technology and techniques for making that marble were developed? I think in the finished forms that we have them, we have to be fair and date our myths, actually, maybe not even to the time exactly when the poems were composed, but we have to admit that we don't necessarily know what shape those myths and poems were in before they were written down. Because even if the text that we have of a poem like Thrymskvida can be dated to the 800s in oral composition, it's written down in the 1200s, and we don't know that things don't get taken out, reshaped, maybe even added along the way. So we can never be 100% confident about that. But I think that we can guess based on the fact that, for example, even Tacitus in the 100s AD mentions a name that we know from Norse myth. He says that there is a goddess named Nerthus, which is exactly what we would expect the Norse god's name Njordr to look like in Proto-Germanic. I think we can guess that the cast of characters was more or less assembled probably by then. Now, were they telling very similar stories? I doubt the stories were very familiar because Tacitus says Nerthus is a goddess and we know Njordr is a god. So there's some big gap there in our understanding. I think probably the closer you get to the late Viking Age, the closer you get to that finished Lincoln Memorial. But I think that if we were to somehow find out that, some Gothic scribe had taken down stories about the gods in the 300s, or even that somewhere in runes there's a long text with some myth that mentions multiple gods. It's earlier than the stories that we know from the Eddas. I think the earlier we went, we'd recognize, shapes, sort of these stories. We recognize some names, but I think probably a lot of the really particular themes and characters and events, the stealing of Otherir, the specific names involved at Ragnarok, things like that, I suspect probably aren't in very crystal clear focus before the Viking Age. But that's just speculation. That's not to say that there's some, I think there's probably some like primitive, early, archaic, unfinished form of the myths earlier than that. I think that they are finished in terms of their own time, probably earlier than that. They just don't look very much like the ones that we're familiar with earlier than that. Maybe not a satisfying answer, but it's what occurs to me in response to a interesting question. And of course, folks, if you're out there hungering to read the myths of the Norse gods as we know them from the Eddas, you might start reading the Poetic Edda, second edition, which has been heavily added to and revised by me. It is now available, at least from Hackett Publishing Company, in North America, and should be available in Europe from Gazelle Publishing soon. Also, you can get signed copies from Boulder Bookstore. I should be signing some copies pretty soon. So, for now, from beautiful Colorado, I'm wishing you all the best. Hey folks, we'll be back to your regular presentation in a moment, but for right now, I'm here at Grimfrost World Headquarters Longhouse with Johan Hegg, and I just want to remind you that if you have Viking needs, you have a Viking supplier. Grimfrost really cares about getting things right. And if you need replica, well, anything, right? Shields, helmets, weapons, board games, cool t-shirts, hats, all sorts of accessories like that. You can get them at grimfrost.com together with my books, and they ship just about anywhere in the world. So check them out. It does help support the channel.